sex is the linchpin of your marriage and your relationship. And it's the one piece that holds the whole wheel on. So all of the other aspects of your relationship, all the other levels of intimacy and connection, everything else is held in place by good sex. Now, that's a bold statement. But if you think about it, if you don't get that right, if that's off, then it has a negative effect on all the other things. And even if they're there and they're happening, there's this underlying resentment and problem. And we see that marriages eventually will unravel or fall apart because of all the built up tension or resentment or frustration around sex. So I'm Greg Denning.
I'm Rachel Denning.
And we have been married for 21 awesome years. We have 7 children, and we are coaches, family coaches, coaching marriage and family and parenting. And we have been traveling. Just kind of a side note here, we love traveling. We travel all over the world together as a family. In fact, Rachel and I just got back from celebrating our 21st anniversary in Portugal, just the two of us, for 13 magical days, including lots of sex. And
it was better than our honeymoon.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We both looked at each other a few days in and were like, this is sincerely better than our honeymoon.
And more than just the sex.
And more than just sex, but the whole thing. And we're in our 40s. We have 7 kids and businesses and all that life has. And we're still at that level of excitement and wonder and connection and genuinely creating an extraordinary marriage. And sex is a huge part of that. It's obviously not the only important piece of marriage, but I think it's more important, and just beyond like the physical aspect of it, it's more important than maybe most people give it credit for.
Well, and I would say it's not the only important aspect, like you said, but it's one of the most important aspects in a healthy marriage. And I know for a lot of people, and perhaps a lot of women, they're going to be resistant to that idea. And I know that I was too at one point. And I would definitely say that there was a turning point in our marriage. There had come this time when I was, with good reason, resistant to sex. We had almost 7 children. I was touched out. I was exhausted. I was overwhelmed. And sex seemed like the very last thing I wanted to do. In fact, I remember thinking once, if I had to go the rest of my life without sex, I would be okay with that. That would be fine with me, because I was so just tired and overwhelmed with life. And I did not understand the significance that it had in our life, in our marriage.
Because I was thinking, if I have to go the rest of the week without sex, I don't know if I'm going to make it.
And at the time, when I was in that mindset, that bothered me. I did not like that at all, because I felt like it was selfish. Why did we need sex? What was the importance of it? Why couldn't we just be friends?
He just has this physical drive or problem. Mm-hmm. And gosh, can't you just control yourself? Can't you think about other things? Is that all you want me for, is sex? And so
all of those things.
It's a big misunderstanding. We even misunderstand it in ourselves, and especially in our partner, and that just causes this divide, this huge gulf that's between us. And until we start working through that, and like, how can I understand myself? How can I understand her? And how can we both understand the consummate importance of sex? Rachel likes to say it's like the hub of a wheel. Mm-hmm. That's just what's keeping all these other aspects of the marriage together and working and rolling forward. We have to understand how important it is. So how did you shift? What happened?
So back to this turning point, our lives could have very easily gone in the direction that many couples do, in that we have this resistance, which I think usually starts around sex. For many couples, they have this wedge that is driven between them around sex.
Usually because one of the couple wants it more than the other. And so there's a bit of frustration there. So I'm the higher desire, and so I want it more often, but I can't force that on her, and I can't get it anywhere else. It would be totally wrong for me to go out and with other women, or even through pornography or even masturbation. Like that's not where I want it to be. So I feel in a sense like I'm in this spot, like I'm limited by you saying yes, but if you reject me, right, and this is what's happening a lot with a lot of couples, I try to initiate, she rejects, and I'm like, oh, there goes rejection. It starts to hurt and it starts to take its toll. And so there's this constant frustration between the higher desire and the lower desire.
And like most people, most men especially, and women too, we can't fully articulate, you weren't able to fully articulate to me why you wanted sex, why you felt you needed sex.
My answer was, because I love you, woman. And that's it. But I couldn't articulate that it's so much more, and we can get into this, but it's so much more than just like my physical desire to have sex.
Right. And so you're unable to articulate to me why you want sex so much. I'm misunderstanding all of the reasons you want sex because I'm interpreting it from my viewpoint. And so we just don't understand each other. And that misunderstanding begins to spread throughout the marriage, affecting all other aspects of the marriage and eventually affecting all other aspects of your life. And if you think that's a bold statement that your misunderstandings about sex will affect all the other areas of your life, trust me, it's not.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it will. So that's why sex is so critical, and this linchpin that Greg was talking about. So we could have gone down this path that many couples go down, where we drift further and further apart, and you end up with an average marriage where you're roommates and you deal with the transactions of family life together, but that's about it.
You're in a mere existence if it doesn't end up in an ugly divorce.
Exactly. But instead, with some luck and serendipity and grace of God, I started to really try to understand why sex was so important. Why was it that my husband was so driven? Now, actually, I will admit this. I started doing my research hoping I would find something to prove that we should have less sex. But what I found instead...
Isn't that awesome?
Yes.
I'm gonna find something just puts him in his
show
place
you.
so he can back off.
So I had my, research and my information to back up that we should have less sex, because I just felt like it was too much for me to deal with. But what I discovered instead, when I studied human relationships, human sexuality, was that sex is a critical linchpin, key piece to a well-functioning marriage. And not only that, but it's a key ingredient, and in fact, it's the main, most important ingredient to a deep, meaningful, intimate, significant relationship. Women crave intimacy in conversation and connection, but the only way that is ever truly possible on a really deep and significant level is by integrating sex into that connection. In fact, we've come to view sex as something that is like a circle. And it doesn't have a beginning or an end, but it does have connecting pieces. It could start with conversation, but ultimately that conversation leads to sex, which the sex then leads to more conversation, which leads to more sex. And the sex then leads to more conversation, but it not only just goes round and round, it actually gets deeper and deeper. And this isn't an innuendo. This is the depth of your connection with your spouse. And so as I began to study and learn about this, I started to change. Now, it started with small things. One of the first things that I read when I studied sexuality and relationships was this idea that you should never say no. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
Who would come up with
How could I do that? Because he doesn't know what I've been through during the day, and he doesn't know how hard it's been. And I'm touched out. I'm getting touched by kids all the time. How could I not say no to sex when he wants to have sex with me? But then I began to understand that saying no to a man when he wants sex, first of all, he's opening himself up. He's being vulnerable. He wants to connect with you. And when you tell him no in that moment, that's like you coming to your husband, needing to talk to him, needing to bare your soul, needing to feel validation and approval for someone, and them saying, no, I'm sorry, I'm too tired, I have a headache, I've talked to people all day at work, no, I'm not going to talk to you. I just can't do that. It's just too much for me. When I began to understand how the equal connection factor for me was the conversation, when he felt that same way about sex and what it was doing to him when I rejected him, then I understood, oh, wow. Saying yes is actually an opportunity for me to connect more with my spouse. Just like when he says yes to listening to me. No, yeah, not talking, because you're usually listening.
I could be short-sighted and I say, why does she want to talk so much? Like, why does she want me to listen? I don't have that need. Like, why does she have that need? Maybe I'll jump online and research some ways that she doesn't need to talk so much, or find other ways, why don't you go talk to other people? And I would be missing out, making a huge mistake. Missing out on the emotional connection that she mostly gets through conversation, and the emotional connection, not just physical, the emotional connection that I mostly get through sex.
Now, we've worked with a lot of couples in the coaching that we do, and we do know that this happens. Women have the opportunity of connecting with other people through conversation. So sometimes that need is fulfilled, and they may not be receiving that from their husband. But what is missing out, or what is happening long term, is that the marriage relationship is being weakened.
Yep.
Because instead of me turning to you for deep conversation, it's not that I can't talk to other people, but the deepest part of my soul, if I turn to you and share that with you, and you receive that, and we have sex, and this doesn't have to happen in the same night, I'm not saying that that's always the case, but as we continue that cycle,
it's a cycle of depth. Yep.
Yeah, our relationship deepens. Now, if I instead say, he never listens to me, he doesn't get me, he doesn't understand me, that happens, I know. And that might be the case with your marriage. And you go talk to someone else, a girlfriend, your mother, whoever, that fulfills your need in the moment, but long term, it's not going to build the deep, meaningful, strong relationship that you want with your spouse. So both partners play a role here, and there's not just one solution, there's not just one fix-all, but if we can understand sex and its significance
in its entirety, and what it means to me and what it means to Rachel, and that it should be a primary source of connection instead of, for many couples, the primary source of contention. Mm-hmm. And so it becomes this dividing wedge, and we actually put in tons of effort and energy to make it a problem, ironically. It's like we're colluding in our own problem. And so what could be this amazing source of an incredible marriage becomes this painful source of a separating and dying marriage.
Well, one thing I noticed when I started to have that transition was that I became aware of how much energy, thought, emotion I had been putting into avoiding sex. I started to think about how I could start avoiding sex by not going to bed at the same time, or this or that or the other. So much energy was put into that, and thought. And I realized that ultimately that was damaging my relationship, that I was purposely trying to create ways to not connect with my spouse. Now, when I started saying yes, wow, it was actually a lot quicker and easier, right? Sometimes literally just very quick and easy. And instead we connected, instead of me avoiding that connection because of the interpretation I was giving to his desire for sex.
So in a very real way, you could spend a little time connecting through sex, or a lot of time fighting, or being bitter or resentful or hateful. I mean, it's saying yes or no has its consequences. Now, you don't always have to say yes. I get it. There's times and seasons for all of it.
Sometimes you need to say no.
And that works out as you're talking through it and understanding it and genuinely both of you really deeply trying to connect and have an extraordinary marriage. So there's a few elements that we wanted to share, like practical practices that have worked for us and for other couples we've worked with that just seem to help. And what's interesting is because we always operate on this whole philosophy that everything affects everything. So all the little pieces of your life are actually affecting your desires or your lack of desire for sex, and your engagement in sex and your enjoyment of sex. And so this has to be a holistic approach, which few people look at it like that. They think, well, what? I just don't enjoy it.
Well, I want to point out for sure that in no way am I abdicating here that you just need to say yes to sex for his benefit, and whatever the consequences are, oh well, just deal with it. What I'm saying is that when you start to see sex as an opportunity to connect, then you start to view it in a different light, and then it starts to become something that you look forward to, you enjoy, it's de-stressing, it's connecting, obviously. It becomes a positive source of meaning and fulfillment in your life because you've changed the way you look at it, and you see it as this amazing, beautiful piece of, I don't even know, the linchpin is the perfect description for this, but this connecting piece that's holding everything together. It becomes that in your life instead of this ugly thing that it had been before.
And then as I shifted my perspective in reality to realize going into sex is different for her than it is for me. What sex means is different for her than it is for me. Her enjoyment of sex is different than it is for me. And as I realized and understood that, and then I started putting way more effort into making it easier for her to clear out space and time.
We call that closing the tabs.
Closing the tabs.
Because women have all these tabs open there in their brain of like the browser tabs of all of these different things they need to be doing and thinking about and fixing, and I need to close those tabs.
In my mind, I'm like, what on earth do the dishes have to do with me and you getting in bed?
In fact, there was this one time when we were living in Morocco, actually, and he was being
amorous.
Amorous, perfect. He was being amorous. And I was agreeable to it, but I needed to close a lot of tabs. And so I kept talking and talking and talking and talking about all of these things and this and this and the kids and this. And finally, he got up out of the bed and went into the bathroom, and I said, "What? What are you doing? It's clear you're not in the mood. I'm going to go do something else." I said, "I'm in the mood now, babe, because I've been talking and closing all of these tabs. So now I have space in my head to actually engage." And so that, when he understood that about me, that was...
Because it was just this opposite in timing and what everything was happening, the whole process of when we feel emotions and how we feel emotions, it was crossed. And so she wanted to talk and get things off her mind, off her chest, and process so that she could clear it all out and be ready to engage. And I'm sitting here listening, oh my goodness,
what does this have to do?
Clearly does not have any interest in me or sex or anything. Like, blah, blah. And finally, I've had enough. I'm out of here. And I didn't understand the crisscross process.
Now, luckily, you caught it right then. You came back to bed and we had sex.
Yep.
But that was a turning point for you to understand my needs and my desires and how I prepared, which for, I think, a lot of women, it's generally mentally they have to prepare to be able to engage in sex.
So I think it's worth right there hitting that as the first thing. If you want to have a better marriage, then improving your sex life will help a ton. And the way to really do that is to be aware and more intentional and deliberate about make it easy. Stop making it harder to have good sex. Do everything you can to make it easier for both of you to have better sex. And a lot of that is, it sounds weird, but preparing the way, right? So clear out any obstacles or blocks or frustration. This can be mental, emotional, or physical, or literal. Like what obstacles are in the way from you, just both of you being totally present and engaged for great sex. It might be like, well, something needs to be done with the kids or the dog or the stuff or the things, or you need to take a shower because you stink or get held, whatever, like all these pieces.
And I'm laughing because very specifically, and you're always so good about this, I have to have the door locked. And in fact, now we actually have a bolt at the top because our kids figured out how to unlock the door. So you bought a bolt and installed it. Toilet paper and gel, we just need to have those handy just in case, like, you know, for the mess and whatever. Like, we need to have those things, and you always make sure that we are prepared with all the supplies we need to just have my mind clear and we're able to focus on what we're trying to do.
And I'll pay attention if she is talking about something that needs to be done or needs to be addressed. And she says, we need to talk about this or this thing, and I can tell it's bothering her. That's not likely to go away. And it's going to be on her mind. And over the years now we've talked, she's like, well, I can't really get into sex or even deep into an orgasm because I keep thinking about this thing.
Right.
So as a man, I'm going to be like, I'm going to take care of the thing. Right? I'm going to help out.
From what's happening in my head is I've got thoughts going around and around in my head, and it's making me live in my head instead of in my body. So I have a harder time feeling what's happening because of what's going on up here. So now I'll even just, if something comes up, I just tell them right in the middle, oh, we're going out with our daughter tomorrow, you know, and I get it out so it doesn't get stuck in my head and I can be present in my body.
So there's a huge reality here, and there's all kinds of research about this, and I think it'll click with you. Your environment and your lifestyle, your everyday life, is a major contributing factor to how often you're going to have sex and how enjoyable sex is and how engaged you can be. If there are a lot of stressors in your life, it literally, because you get stressed, you get frustrated, so it starts to get in your head, like Rachel's saying, but it also changes your biochemistry. Mm-hmm. And so if you're quite literally stressed or afraid or frustrated, you're going to have more cortisol, and cortisol just shuts down sex drive. Mm-hmm. So if you have stressful work or stress at home, or you're just stressed a lot, and it could be even just negative input, you're watching the news all the time, you're worried, you're going to have so much cortisol in your body, it just tanks your sex drive. And so you might be like, what? I'm just not as interested in sex. The reality is you've got so much cortisol pumping through your whole body. Of course you're not.
Right.
Your body's in survival mode.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your body's in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you're in the fight or flight mode, it is shutting down your prefrontal cortex even. It's shutting down non-essential body functions, and one of those is sex. So if you are in this high stress, your body literally is having a more difficult time preparing for sex or even thinking about sex at all, because it's thinking, we've got to fight or flight or flee. We're trying to save ourselves here. How can we have sex? Like, that's non-essential. We need to run. We need to get out of here. We need to protect ourselves. So removing, reducing, de-stressing is, of course, a major component to being even open to having more sex.
So one of the simple practices here is just look through your life and say, what's causing stress? And how can we deeply and permanently eliminate a lot of unnecessary stressors in our life and get back to this place where you feel whole and relaxed and open? You're not in survival mode, you're in enjoyment mode and connection mode. The same is true with distractions. We live in the age of distraction. And so it may not be that you're stressed, but you're just completely distracted. And this happens mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. You could just be, there's so much going on, so many lights and noises and sounds and bells and whistles. There's so much happening that sexual arousal doesn't even come across your radar. If it does, you don't even notice it because there's so much happening to distract you from everything that's going on.
Of course, this is usually on your phone, right? Your social media.
Yeah, it's on TV or the phone or your alerts or dings or calls or kids or stuff. Like, your life might just be so noisy, so to speak, literally or figuratively, that distraction's keeping you from engaging. And again, you're not aware of this, so you're going along, you're just busy life, and you're like, no, I don't have time for sex, I don't even think about sex. It's because there's not enough space for it in your life.
Which I think is especially true for women. I know that this was true for me when my mind felt so busy all the time with all those tabs, all the things on my to-do list. I I didn't think about sex. I couldn't think about sex. Like, how could I? I just had so many other things to focus on that there was no space to be in my body, to be aware, to be in the moment. So not only is this critical, I think, for your overall health and well-being, but it's definitely critical for your sex life. You have to create more space in your life. You have to create time and space to just be, to just enjoy, to just be in the moment. And it's amazing, especially if you take that time to be in the moment with your spouse.
That's what I was just thinking. It's magical.
Give it any length of time, it's going to lead to sex, because that's the magic of a relationship. That's ultimately the essence of men and women being attracted to each other.
And in marriage, right? I can hang out with my buddies, she can hang out with her girlfriends, I can talk to my brother, I can do all these things. You can have roommates, but that beautiful and unique piece of marriage is like when we are just ourselves together, it leads to great sex. It's amazing.
Because you are a man and you are a woman who are attracted to each other, who are drawn to that special connection that is sex. That is what's unique about the relationship you have with your spouse that's different from a relationship you have with anyone else.
Yes. Another element is health. Ample amounts of research has shown that the condition of your body affects the desire for sex and the enjoyment and quality of sex. So one, for example, is if you're overweight or obese, it just tanks your drive and your enjoyment. But it's true with the quality of food you're eating, your exercise, your overall health. Some of you are just you're sore all the time, you're in pain all the time, your joints hurt, your back. I mean, if you have really bad pain in your shoulder or your back or your knee or whatever, you're not sitting there thinking, man, I could go for some great sex right now, because you're like, this pain becomes a major deterrent and distraction.
Kind of like the fight or flight mode.
Exactly. You're like, oh no, I can't think about sex because my knee hurts, or it just doesn't come up because the body's off. But when the human body, a normal human body, is really healthy and feels alive, it has a very strong sex drive for decades, right? And so just look carefully at your health. Eat well, eat very well. Cut out processed foods and chemicals and junk and sugars. Exercise regularly. I mean, that has shown, like, the more you exercise vigorously, the more your sex drive gets activated, right? And again, be active, but be active together. Just
it's
get
also
out and living life.
Yeah,
super attractive. Then, in addition to that, do activities that are romantic, that are fun, that are connecting. Our trip to Portugal and the trips we have. So every year we do a big long trip together. Every quarter we usually do 2 or 3 nights away, and then we try every 6 to 8 weeks we try to do an overnighter together. We're doing another one, in a couple of days. Yeah, another one. We're doing these things because we're creating memories. We're having new experiences. We go out to a nice restaurant every week. We're doing fun things together. We tried pickleball together. Yesterday we went kayaking, and then our little girls ran out and jumped on the kayaks, and they went with us. But we're trying to do things all the time because it creates life. It creates spark. It lights you up. It fills you with love and emotion and attraction and connection, and doing good things together, doing fun things, and being a better person. As I strive to be a better person, I'm more attractive. I should be doing everything in my power to be attractive to my spouse, even though we've been married 21 years. Right? I think a lot of people just go the opposite direction. Be attractive and do romantic, fun, engaging things, and music and movies and books and things that stir those emotions and that attraction.
And it doesn't even just have to be romantic per se, but just doing things in general, like you were saying, is more attractive. When you are a interesting person who has interesting thoughts and ideas and wants to do interesting things, that just becomes more attractive. You're drawn to that as a person because that's fascinating.
Having an intellectual conversation with Rachel is so sexy. I listen to her talk about things, and I'm just like, dang, this conversation has nothing to do with romance, but it is going to end up in the bedroom because it's going to be awesome. It's just attractive, right? It's fun, it's engaging because you're just being alive. So And it has to go way beyond what we talk about the difference between transactional and transformational. The transactional is like, okay, babe, let's talk about paying the bills. Let's talk about the kids. Let's talk about our schedule. Let's talk about running the house. It has to happen. It's transactional stuff. But if that's all you ever do, and especially this happens more and more the longer you've been married. And so if you've been married, 8, 10, 12, 15, 20 years, then it for so many couples, it becomes transactional. It's like, what do you guys do together? Well, we had our finances meeting, and we talked about, the chores and the tasks, and we went over our schedule. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's so lame. No wonder there was no spark and romance. Oh, no wonder you guys didn't end up in this awesome make-out session on the floor, because you're sitting there like, which chores are you going to do? And okay, are you going to take which kid where? And if all you do is the transactional stuff, it's lame. So be more intentional, be more deliberate, make it fun, make it sexy, like take care of the things that need to be taken care of, but then do more. And it doesn't take that much effort or that much money. It can, you can go big if you want, and we do that too. Like we'll go big, we'll do fancy restaurants or big trips or exotic things, great. But sometimes it's just a little extra effort to, hey, let's just talk, let's just hold hands, let's just go watch the sunset. Mm-hmm. And just be, and when we're watching the sunset, we're not gonna be like, okay, who's running the errands in the morning? Like be there and be in love again and date again and court each other again. Make it matter.
Yeah, and again, back to this idea of why have more sex? Why be lovers? And the reason is because when you do that, and we're speaking from our own experience, but also from working with lots and lots of couples in our coaching on 5 continents, that when you do this, when you make the effort to be lovers and not just spouses, it makes everything else in your marriage and in your life better. It literally becomes this lubricant, right? To smooth out all of the bumps and bruises of life in a way. It helps you to always have this strong, powerful rock that you can rely on to face whatever comes in life. No matter what, we have each other, and we know that we have this bond between us that has been built through sex and everything that comes with that.
Which is this is beautiful and powerful glue that holds us together. The last thing I want to mention is that I was doing a coaching session a couple days ago, and my 18-year-old son was there, and we were talking about how when you are given an opportunity, like, don't blow it. And there was a couple examples in this. It was a group coaching session, and somebody had been given this great opportunity, and they just blew it. They didn't come prepared. It was a musician recording, a professional recording, and they came and they weren't prepared. They didn't prepare their piece. They didn't know their parts, and they blew it. And they got fired. They got thrown out of an opportunity. And then my son was contrasting that with, he just had this stunt opportunity, and they just made a light suggestion. I'm like, okay, the suggestion, the little opening, this tiny window of opportunity, don't blow it. And the same is true with sex, right? So if there's an opportunity, if I'm like, hey, baby, and she's like, yeah, maybe if this gets done, but that's getting done. Or whatever it is, right? If there's an opportunity, don't blow it. And what I really want to emphasize here is when you do then have sex, make sure it's special. Make it great. Make it count. And most importantly, make sure your partner enjoys it. Right? So I don't want this to sound weird or off, but if I want to have a great sexual relationship with Rachel and have sex more often, I need to make sure she enjoys sex. Because why would she want more sex if she doesn't enjoy it? And so learn about it. I've read many books about it because I was like, okay, I want to understand this. We've talked about it, and we both try to strategize, and it changes. It's changed over our marriage, like what works better than other things, and talk about it, experiment with it, learn about it, but make sure it's enjoyable. And if you're both enjoying it and really connecting, you make it special, and you build your life in a way that makes it easier to enjoy it, it's going to happen more often, and you're going to love it. And so it becomes this wonderful part of your marriage. You're like, this is fantastic.
And as a result, every other part of your marriage gets better. The conversation, the connection, the intimacy.
Even the errands.
Even the errands get better. That's right.
Even the mundane can be magical when you are just madly in love with your spouse. And please don't use any excuses about time and familiarity, like, oh, I know everything about her now. We've been married 21 years, blah, blah, blah. No way, after 21 years, we just had a rockin' honeymoon. Like, the fire's still there, the spark and the passion, the romance is still there. We're still best friends because we work on it. And it comes down to daily actions and habits and, occasional big, exotic, romantic actions and habits. And it makes marriage amazing. And so it becomes this source of so much happiness and joy instead of, and you guys know this, if it gets into an ugly, miserable existence or divorce, that's some of the most painful things you can experience in life. And the choice is yours. And so circling back now, having sex be the hub of the wheel or the linchpin that keeps it all together, get that right, and marriage makes life awesome. You get one shot at it, right? One shot at life. And the shot at marriage with your partner to make it awesome. So put those in there. We're happy to help if you guys can reach out to us, connect with us, ask questions. We're doing that all the time. We have our podcasts. We love to help couples and families live an extraordinary life. So make your marriage absolutely extraordinary by making sex matter and making it great.